Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Law Review. Probably my favorite podcast on my channel because this is where I get to learn from people that I believe are experts. You'll hear other people say otherwise. But thank you very much for joining. We got a lot to cover today. I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to bring up everybody on the big screen. Here we go. Some people are still working, so you will see them on mute. And maybe do a quick intro. I think everyone here has been on this channel before. If you are going to be working and doing a bunch of typing, please try to mute and then unmute when you guys are speaking. So let's start with how I see it all on my screen. Drew, why don't you just do a very quick intro and then we'll jump to somebody else.
Hi, Tone. Hi, everybody watching from home. Drew Hinkius. I'm General Counsel of Athena Blockchain, a crypto investment bank, and I'm an adjunct professor at NYU Law School and NYU Business School. Thanks for having me.
Hey, guys. I think someone has our own show running in the background somewhere on their computer. Maybe. I'm not sure. But other than that, okay. Bill, quick intro.
Hi, Bill Restis. For everybody out there, securities class action attorney and also helping clients with raising capital on the blockchain. We'll keep it at that for now so everybody can get in and say hello.
Excellent. Sasha, go for it.
Hi, Sasha Hodder, attorney with DLT Law Group in Tampa, Florida, and focused on blockchain law.
Excellent. Jason.
Hi, Jason Seibert here. I just kind of am who I am.
Jason, you are a securities attorney pretty much, more on the defense side, right?
I've done both defense and plaintiff's work and a lot of advising over the last 4 years on, what isn't a security within the space. Unfortunately, I've made a lot of correct predictions, which have made me not very popular because actually nailed what the regulators were going to do. The crypto space doesn't like to hear that, but regardless, I'm here, happy to be here, happy to help.
Excellent. Oh, and you know what? We got Adela joining us right now as well. And David is still a little busy. He'll do his intro. Adela, are you ready for your intro? You got to unmute and go for it. Please.
Oh, unmute.
Yes.
Hey guys, how is everybody today?
Good. We're just about to start. Give us a very quick intro and then we'll go on with our first topic.
So my name's Adela Tula-Forster and I have been in the sort of payments space, hi Sasha, for about 17 years. And I've worked with several people on this panel here. I've been in Bitcoin for a long time, about 8 years now. I'm just really excited to be a part of this, man. Yeah.
All right, cool. Who we got in the background there with you? Is that Rasa?
By the way, Rasa is here.
I have not heard from you. Hey, Rasa, we can't see your face, but good.
We can see Rasa's legs, and that's all I care about.
Rasa's wearing the tennis uniform.
Yeah. Wimbledon and whites.
Right.
All right.
Hey, go back to where I can only see Rasa's legs. That was fantastic. Oh, there it is.
Rasa's been around the crypto space for a long time, so we'll see. we'll see if he has any insight for us as well as we go on. All right. So first topic of the day.
Hold on, Tone. Before we start, is there any way I can do any kind of Bitcoin tipping for Rasa's legs? I'd like to.
Oh God. Yeah, you can just.
The Sharon Stone move. That was fantastic.
Yeah, this is the only reason why I deal with all the trolls in the live chat. Just so I can get tips through Super Chat. It's the only reason why I actually put up with it. So please, if you've enjoyed Rasa's leg crossing, go ahead and tip. All right, let's go on with the first story. There was actually an article written in Bitcoin Magazine. I have not had time to read it. I was too busy actually watching all of the Senate hearings. But yeah, there was a summary article in Bitcoin Magazine I have not had a chance to read it, but I'm going to play a couple of experts from this. So the confusing part was there were 3 different Senate hearings a couple of days ago on the 18th, and all of them mentioned Bitcoin. Now, 2 of the Senate hearings actually were about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and one of them is just somebody asked a question to the Fed Chairman Powell. So I actually ended up watching most of this 3-hour hearing with the Fed Chairman, thinking that this was one of the Bitcoin hearings, but it really wasn't. Now, I actually enjoyed listening to that hearing about the state of the economy, which is what I used to do back in the day anyway. But that was good. I'm probably not even going to play a clip from that. I am going to play, so here are my takeaways, my brief takeaways. I hope you guys watched most of it. So the future of money and digital currency. So this was by the Financial Services Committee. There were 4 experts there speaking. Here is the only expert that was speaking that I felt should have been on that panel speaking to the congressman.
The opportunity to testify today. My name is Norbert Michel. I'm the director of the Center for Data Analysis at the Heritage Foundation, and the views that I express today are my own. They should not be construed as representing any official position of the Heritage Foundation. Cryptocurrencies have rapidly expanded since the introduction of Bitcoin in 2008. Their underlying technology, a distributed database that allows digital assets to be transferred without a third-party intermediary, holds the potential to transform the financial industry. This innovation should be fostered, not smothered. My remarks today will provide 4 specific points relating to the use of cryptocurrencies, cash, and other alternative forms of money. First, electronic means of payment have become more widespread as technology has changed. But all
right, I'm not going to play all of it, but like when you go back and listen to this whole video, and all of these links are in the video description, I felt that Dr. Michel had the best grasp out of all the other panelists, and he was worth listening to. So anyone, let's just general comments. And of course, everyone is talking about this particular senator.
Blockchain is a good technology, but it can be used to track and transfer sovereign currency. There is nothing that can be done with cryptocurrency that cannot be done with sovereign currency that is meritorious and helpful to society. The role of the U.S. dollar in the international financial system is a critical component of U.S. power. It brought Iran to the negotiating table, and we argue about whether we got a good enough deal or not in the JCPOA. We would have nothing had it not been for the role of the dollar. We should prohibit U.S. persons from buying or mining cryptocurrencies. Mining alone uses electricity, which takes away from other needs and or adds to the carbon footprint. As a medium of exchange, cryptocurrency accomplishes nothing except facilitating narcotics trafficking, terrorism, and tax evasion. Some of its supporters delight in that. That if you can disempower the U.S. government from being able to prevent terrorism, narcotics trafficking, and tax evasion, you have somehow struck a blow for liberty. That is reason enough to ban it. But its role as an investment is at least as bad. We have certain animal spirits in our culture, a willingness to take a risk, to place a bet. This can be harnessed by gambling casinos, which at least pay very high local taxes and created a city of Las Vegas out of a desert.
All right, well, I think we had enough. I felt that the other Senate hearings, the one from the Agricultural Committee, I'm going to play a couple of clips from there after. I felt that those Senate hearings were significantly better and more educational and more useful. This congressman, sorry, not senator, Congressman Sherman from LA, that caught all the attention. I don't think it should have. I think this is just bad general thinking. But I'd like to get all of your thoughts from a law perspective. I will say, however, that Mr. Sherman does represent the porn industry in his district. And I believe his district is the largest pornography industry in the nation. So it's kind of hard to stand there on moral ground about Bitcoin based on that. But yeah, so Anybody wants to go first, or do I pick somebody?
Yeah, Tone, this is Drew. I want to make a couple comments. First, I was fortunate to get to participate on a panel with Dr. Michel a couple months back. He has been writing through his organization, the Heritage Foundation, about the regulation of crypto assets since 2015. He's taken a position that they should not be taxed as property and that they should be untaxed. Which surprises some folks because it's very different than what the United States has done. And a lot of folks, when you say that to them, say, oh, so it should be taxed like a currency and therefore subject to currency trading taxes, which in certain instances may actually be a higher rate. And that's not actually what Dr. Michel's writings say. Norbert actually advocates for a lot of the most traditional conservative libertarian approaches to taxation, which includes either flat taxation or liberalization of taxation by imposing no taxation at all. So if you Google him and you go back and look at his writing, you're going to find some arguments that suggest crypto should not be taxed at all. I am guaranteeing that 50 to 75% of the people that are watching this show think that that's an amazingly wonderful idea. But it's probably not going to happen, at least in the short term. There's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, the IRS of all of our federal regulators may be the most overtaxed, ironically, and underarmed to take on new technology. They are working internally with limited resources, and like all of our other regulators, have had to develop expertise internally. They issued guidance in 2014. They issued the John Doe summons in 2016, got data from Coinbase in 17, and are now doing the Joint Chiefs in 18 in order to try to identify areas where there's tax fraud involved. You can forget that levying and collection of taxes serves dual aims. First, of course, it is to collect revenues, but secondarily, there's a really critical information reporting aspect. People have to disclose who they are and what they're doing. I just can't see the IRS backing off on that whole hog the way that Mr. Michel wants or thinks should happen. But that doesn't mean that his voice is not worth discussing. My only other comment as to the rest, what Congressman Sherman said can be said equally about US $20 bills as far as being involved in money laundering and illegal crime. There are people within the government who feel that way, and a lot of them don't want to have their minds made up. But if you look around in the business world, folks have come around to understanding the really novel use cases and disruptive impact to cryptocurrencies. And I know that folks in his constituency, I know some of them from the crypto alpha group that I'm in have talked about actually doing something in an organized manner to educate Congressman Sherman. I don't want to call them out by name, but rest assured that some of his constituents are interested in helping him understand.
I'm just curious if Congressman Sherman understands the role that cryptocurrency plays within the adult entertainment industry and how much cryptocurrency actually, from a constitutional standpoint, represents. And this is something I've been thinking about for a while from a political activist speech standpoint, how the use of cryptocurrency can fall within a free speech component and how much the adult entertainment industry has been aligned with free speech. I think all of us can agree that there's no other organization within at least US law that's done more for free speech than the adult industry. And if Mr. Sherman is representing that area, he might want to become just a little bit more educated on how cryptocurrency and those types of natural alliances kind of go hand in hand.
And I want to dovetail on that too. I think that Mr. Sherman, Congressman Sherman, had a conclusion that he was trying to find a reasoning for, because I think he really showed his hand when he was describing the problems that this would create for the U.S. government. That the U.S. dollar is central to U.S. power, that there's a seigniorage privilege that the government gets in making profits off the money that it creates. And I think that that really reveals the threat, for example, that Bitcoin does hold to the traditional financial system. One of the other things that really struck me was, he kept harping upon what legitimate advantages cryptocurrencies. Now, I think there's really only one. There's Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency has, as opposed to current financial assets, and that is, he kept coming back to saying this is only useful for narco terrorists and tax evaders. And of course, we know that's not true. This is very traceable asset. But I think that it's important because none of these individuals that were testifying at this hearing had any good answers to what's the legitimate use for this. And it's
one thing that was interesting there is he talked about the Iran deal. And all of us know that the Iran deal was 100% in cash, right? And there's a reason it was in cash. If you want to avoid UN sanctions around the world and you want to let Iran be able to do business and do commerce, you give them cash. If you had given them cryptocurrency, they wouldn't have been able to do it because it's all assets that can be tracked. It's 100% auditable. So here, just in the example of this senator saying, the Iran deal may or may not have been a good thing, and talking about that, what struck me is that deal was done in cash, and there was a specific reason for that, is that it is not as traceable as cryptocurrency is. So there's nothing about cryptocurrency, and I think all of us would agree, that creates some kind of new crime. In fact, I think cash allows for more crime to happen more anonymously than cryptocurrency does. And to that end, I would just ask what your thoughts are on that, where you have a senator talking about the power of the almighty dollar that is still the number one, criminal currency on the planet, just because it is relatively untraceable.
Yeah. Hey guys, I just want to jump in there real quick. Something else for you guys to think about. My problem, and we heard that in both hearings, where the congressmen are saying how cryptocurrencies are used by countries to get around our sanctions. Isn't it the duty of a country to its citizens to get around another country's sanctions that hurt their economics?
No, there's an interest in maintaining international order.
Like if the U.S. is being sanctioned by China, isn't the U.S. supposed to find a way to get around those sanctions to do business so that the people in their country do well?
No, you're talking about international law and you're talking about governmental sanctions and treatises and things like that. It's not a government's job to figure out how to break the law in order to get around a tariff. Tom.
Don't let these guys like jump all over you because they're lawyers. Absolutely, it's whatever government's being sanctioned. They're not saying thank you for the sanctions. Let's just comply and kowtow. I can't believe I'm on the side of China, North Korea, Venezuela, Iran. Thank you for putting me on that side on this. But
I never thought I would hear David Silver in support of Iran violating sanctions. This is a new day.
I mean, your rabbi would be appalled, Silver.
He would be.
I mean, you got the liberal Jew from New York now supporting Iran. Look, I think it's a farce. It's a nonsensical argument. I think that a lot of people, especially Democrats who were on the panels, who loved bringing up the Russia connection to Bitcoin, it was for play. What they didn't understand that the reason the Russian agents were able to be tracked using the Bitcoin was because it was on the ledger and it was able to be traced. That doesn't change. That's still anonymous. I mean, if they didn't know who they were looking at and they weren't dumb enough to get the actual key and then they weren't able to know which of the wallets were being used, it wouldn't have mattered. So they were using that to score cheap political points. I don't know. I kind of stepped into the middle of the question. But I think the only thing I heard about taxes, some guy, first of all, Drew, if you're going to call him Dr. Michael, whatever, I want to be called Dr. Silver. I think everyone else on this line is a doctor. So unless I'm in cardiac arrest from being diabetic and obese and he's going to crack my chest, he's not a doctor. So
we'll see if we can get him over there. That would make for amazing viewing.
It would. So that's it. I'm good unless there's another question I was supposed to answer. I think I answered
that's the thing. Like I've watched all the hearings. It's kind of all jumbled together now. I'm gonna have to do separate videos on this. But for those of you that watched the hearings, I don't know. Bill, get in here. Did you watch?
No, I just wanted to say that the problem, nobody had a good answer for Senator Sherman, and that's a real problem because this becomes part of their congressional record, which becomes a basis for bullshit legislation that none of us want.
Well, you know that it's a strategy of Senate panelists or Senate committees to only invite certain people to panels to testify, right? And within there, you also have certain lobbying agencies that request to have people go and testify. And until the right people that are level-headed, that are middle of the road, that are pragmatic, that don't sway, either way, are in front of these Senate committee hearings, we're really not going to get good information either way.
Well, our second panel in the agricultural panel, 3 people of the 5 sitting there were on the Perkins memo to the SEC. You had no less who was from Perkins. You had Andreessen there, and you had who's the panel, and well, Gensler at MIT wasn't. You have the Badet, the purple hair, who I'm assuming everyone else knows better than I do. So I mean, this couldn't have been. This is why I disagree with what Bill just said. These are people who are against regulation. I was a little disappointed with who was selected for the second panel. I mean, every time they said they wanted regulation, they were really making the sandbox argument. They wanted protection for the early adopters. They don't really want regulation. That's why I thought Gensler was the best one, who said all the exchanges need to be registered and KYC, AML for on-ramping and off-ramping. I thought that was the most important point that I think most of the Congress people are going to walk away with.
Well, remember Gensler's background too, right? Gensler, I believe, previously was with the CFTC, and apparently Gensler is also willing to read the things that come from regulators and explain back to these members of Congress what the law has instructed the industry to do.
Take one step back. Where was he before the CFTC? Because it's important.
Where was he?
He was
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman, yeah.
So I agree. He's got a nice balance of the two.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. On the second panel, the only person worth listening to was actually Gary Gensler. I didn't like listening to anybody else answering those questions other than Gary Gensler. He seemed to be the only one that kind of understood what he was talking about to maybe an 80% capacity. True. Which is pretty damn good, because some of those people, I'd give them maybe 10% of an understanding.
I disagree with you. Just because they're not saying what you want doesn't mean they didn't understand.
Sasha wants to get in here. Let's let Sasha.
Yeah, let's Adela. Let's get Adela in here, and then we'll get Sasha in there.
So one thing that was really kind of disappointing to me was, well, I wouldn't say disappointing because that just a little concerning, right? Was that so Mr. Sherman actually has a 100% rating. His legislative record has a 100% rating from the Human Rights Campaign, right? I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but it's basically a civil rights advocacy group for that lobbies in the U.S., right, for rights for LGBT, marriage equality, hate crimes, and other things, right? Human rights, right? And so you would think that somebody like that would not be out there talking about how we should prohibit people from buying and mining cryptocurrencies. I mean, why? How do those things like match up? I understand that, hasty regulatory pronouncements are, likely to miss the mark and have unintended consequences, like Gorfine said, right? But when you have these people out there speaking like that, you have to at least understand and acknowledge that there are people who are in positions of decision making that are going to believe that. Rasa's legs. Are people tipping for Rasa's legs? Do we?
I haven't seen it yet, but it's hard for me to pay attention to everything. No, it's okay. Don't let him distract you. Just keep going, Adele. I'm trying. I thought I can have a professional show with a bunch of lawyers, but clearly I've been mistaken.
And then you have to go and invite Jason, right? So No, so that's what I want to.
Hey, listen, David started it, by the way. I just want for the record, David started this.
I'm gonna give Ross a wardrobe change in a while because we're gonna do that. We're gonna have wardrobe changes. So, but I wanted, I just had the same sort of like, just feeling of like massive frustration. Like, you've had so much time to figure out how this thing fucking works. And that's the best that we can get from you. Like, you're supposed to be the cool guy, the porn guy, the human rights guy. And that's the best we're getting from you. It's very disappointing. Even Ross is here and we were watching it and Ross is going like, oh my God.
By the way, I am getting word that he voted against the Iran deal.
So
that matters.
Some relationship with a human rights campaign, and I'm thinking maybe the reason is that there are social issues and economic issues, and a lot of times people on one side of social issues are on the opposite side of economics issues. So maybe that's why.
Well, it's hard to be simultaneously fiscally conservative and socially liberal, and I think that's kind of the hallmark of a libertarian centrist, of which I kind of raise my hand to, but I think we've got a lot of hands being raised on that. What I will say is that if Mr. Sherman is listening, I'd be more than happy to fly to California at my own expense and give him a briefing on, simple, pragmatic regulatory approaches to cryptocurrency and how they can be useful not only in the economy, but how they can have, simple regulation that doesn't kill anything, but also protects people. I think that's what we all want.
Hey, let's get Sasha in here. Sasha, go ahead. I know you watched all the hearings. Go for it. Then I want to play a couple of really short clips from the second hearing that I thought was way more informative.
Yeah, I agree. The second hearing, I really enjoyed watching. The first one, Dr. Michel was excellent, as you pointed out, and as Drew pointed out. And I really liked his argument about the competition side. And he also said that the denomination bills 1 to 100 of cash have actually been increasing since the 90s. So a lot of these arguments were that we've gone to a digital society, and he was saying that cash is increased steadily. So all these arguments against crime.
So the use of cash in commerce has actually increased since the 90s. That's what he was pointing out.
Yeah, which I think is interesting because of the everyone talking about privacy aspects of Bitcoin, everything being public. Like in response to Congressman Sherman, if we moved to a Bitcoin economy, there wouldn't be all that cash in there where it is completely private when you're doing it with cash. But then also he was talking a lot about competition and looking at the best way to not hindering Bitcoin by giving it a disadvantage on the tax side, where everyone has to calculate their tax basis if they're to use it to buy coffee. Whereas when we're doing cash, we don't have to take that action. So it doesn't allow a real steady competition to see what the best payment methods is. And I thought that argument was very good. And then they had that Dr. Prasad on there, who he said, a couple years ago, he looked at Bitcoin and he either could take a couple hours to figure out how to buy it or take a couple hours to write an academic paper on it. And he chose the latter. And then he went on to talk quite a bit about how things like Tether are what the future is because they're actually backed by something. So I thought, what is that person doing talking?
That was really bad.
Yeah, so
it's statements like that almost like discredit everything else you say in front of Congress.
So a couple of months ago, when I gave an hour presentation to the California CPA board and their forensic accounting division, all of these folks were being trained on how to be a forensic accountant within cryptocurrency. And I was the lunch speaker, and I asked everybody by show of hands to say or identify how many people actually had a cryptocurrency wallet, how many people even had Bitcoin, and nobody raised their hands. And that was striking to me, that here you had an entire group of professionals that were trying to be trained, that were going to be these forensic specialists on cryptocurrency, and not a single one of them had even used it. So at that point I said, look, anybody that downloads an Edge wallet, shout out to Paul, to come up to me at the end of the session and I would give them $5 worth of Bitcoin so they could at least know how it works. They could at least, at a very minimum, use it. If they're going to be an expert on it, you have to use it. You can't just be an academic and read about it. You have to get into it. You have to immerse into it. You have to understand how it works, why it works. You have to look at the transactions. You have to understand, unspent transactions. You have to, anyway, it's a pet peeve of mine of people who pretend to be experts, but they've never even had it. So
absolutely agree. And then one of the other things they talked about on a tax perspective was the CFTC in the afternoon session said they need $281 million from Congress. And the response to that comment was that the IRS needs to do a better job taxing this to come up with that money for the CFTC. So we'll see what happens next tax year if there's more action in that arena.
Yeah, it's going to get interesting. Now, like I said, the second hearings. Now, I didn't realize, this is why I was confused. It was by the House Agriculture Committee. They're the ones that held the better version of the hearings on cryptocurrency.
So agriculture traditionally has controlled the commodities exchange, because think about it. If you're a major farmer and you're selling your corn or your pork bellies, traditionally, they've allowed farmers to participate in futures markets so they can hedge their economic risk.
No. I understand that. It's just that, when I think of Bitcoin, I don't exactly think of corn, but yeah, that's how our future.
I think of Bitcoin, actually, if we're going to be real. Bitcoins are the way of the future, Tone. Way of the future.
Shout out to Dan, Quarantine Clan.
So there were a couple of really good highlights from this one. I want to play, I guess, two of them. Here we go.
Ranking member, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know where to start. I'm somebody that believes we should still be on the gold standard. And that I think we should audit the Fed because I don't really trust them. So what worries me about this is that, you say there's $250 billion of capitalization here or whatever. How much money is actually here? I mean, this just seems like a Ponzi scheme to me. It's, I think the stock market is a casino, so that's where I'm coming from. So, if I, I'm going to send $100,000 to somebody through one of these deals, who's going to stand behind it? So I give the money, I guess, to one of you guys, and then you turn around, create these things and send it to somebody else. Well, in the meantime, what if you went broke? I was involved when we found out about credit default swaps and figured out that everybody was trading these things and there was nothing there. And if we wouldn't have stopped in, the whole economy would have collapsed. And I don't know if we got a similar situation going on here with this, but, what is behind this? If there's no money at the end of the day, who's going to make up for this? Can anybody explain that to me? Mr. Gensler?
Could I take a shot? I think that I'd split it in two buckets. In this field where venture capitalists, entrepreneurs are developing an idea and asking people for money, they publish a white paper, they build a following, Reddit posts, and these are different communities, social network posts, Medium and so forth. And they build a following and then they sell it and raise money. And sometimes it's small, just like a crowdfunding on Kickstarter. But most of them aren't. There's been 3,800 of them today. Over 50% of them fail within 4 months. And there's different estimates how many are scams and frauds. There are good faith actors in the middle of it too. A lot of good faith actors, but there's a lot of fraud and scams. If right now, if they fail, only way you could do is try under the securities laws to say they were an unregistered, non-compliant security and try to, under the private rights of actions under securities law, try to get something back. Nothing. In the second category, it's digital gold. The digital gold, which is Bitcoin. And while there's nothing behind it, I would say, Mr. Ranking Member, there's really nothing behind gold either. You might, all of this. We have, what's behind it is a cultural norm that for thousands of years, we like gold. The value of gold, the worldwide value of gold is $7 trillion, by the way, just to give you a little sense of it. but only about 10% of the annual production of gold is used in manufacturing. The rest of it is because we think it's kind of nice to have gold necklaces and jewelry, or we do it as a store of value. So Bitcoin is a modern form of digital gold, and it's a social construct.
But the money, they're just creating this money out of nowhere. I mean,
in the first category, the investor type that would be under the
I get
SEC.
that,
but in the second category, you're right, which was under this committee. I mean, you're going to be grappling with this for a while, I think.
I mean, in the first category, I mean, no, I assume those people are sophisticated enough to realize they're going to get fleeced potentially.
Yeah, no, I don't. So this is where I'm going to end it right there with that last statement that I want to slightly. I want to say it again.
You're going to be grappling with this for a while, I think.
This part.
I mean, in the first category, I mean, no, I assume those people are sophisticated enough to realize they're going to get fleeced potentially. You know, I mean, are they? Or I mean, I think there's people get into that area that don't realize what they're getting into. They think.
Right. So when I heard that, that made me chuckle a little bit. Where I mean, Gensler did a great job separating Bitcoin from ICOs, and the senator like kind of realized, hey, you know, if 50% of them are fail in the first 4 months, and we now have other research that is saying 80% of them fail so far in the next like maybe 6 months. And I'm pretty sure 99.9% of them, if not 100%, will fail over, you know, the rest of the decade. No, there are no qualified, no, they are going to get fleeced, and you're not dealing with qualified investors because anyone can buy into an ICO. So what are you guys' thoughts on this part of the hearing?
So the first thing that I noticed is that a lot of folks have a tough time drawing the parallels between today's cryptocurrency age and the 1990s .com and telecom act boom. The 96 Telecom Act launched multiple telephone companies, and there were tons of these companies that sprung up overnight and they failed within a year. The fact that they fail within 4 months now with cryptocurrency companies just means that it's an accelerated timeline. So this isn't something new. We've seen this in the past. We saw this back in the 1920s. We saw this in plastics. We saw this in multiple other areas, but most recently within the .com era. You know, I think if all of us remember, you know, Ask Jeeves or Digital Equipment was a monster company and they failed. So what succeeds and what doesn't succeed does not necessarily mean that it's a scam. It just means that, you know, public adoption in the market didn't adopt it. However, I think there are some that do start off as a scam, but I think those are very few. I think there are some good ideas that start, and the market is fickle. And Adam Smith kind of nailed that a long time ago.
Yeah, no, but Jason, but the point here is, who are the investors in these companies that fail? Like, and should it be, you know, should you immediately do your ICO to anybody that knows how to use a computer?
Well, I think David wants to take a moment to prop up his business and do a little advertising on those people that might invest in this.
Well, I mean, first of all, I love I assume everyone's a sophisticated investor. I mean, do I need to say, connect? I mean, it's like, come on, like, obviously not everyone's a sophisticated investor.
Well, what about Dr. Ruha, OneCoin? I mean, that's one of my favorites.
You know, I thought, and I emailed Gensler after I watched the video this morning, and I'm like, I can't believe you didn't drop my name. I'm like, it would have been a perfect time to drop my name, but unfortunately, he likes hanging out with coolie lawyers.
We should all be marketing more for you, Dave. You're right.
Exactly. You know, we all understand this. You know, I think that, and I speak about this all the time, and and I stole this from the Winklevoss twins early on. They are huge proponents, and they go out, they talk about Bitcoin just replacing gold. And there's a strong argument that that's truly the best value moving forward to to extrapolate the value of the asset, make it a $1 trillion asset class, if you can do, Bitcoin is the new gold. Because Gensler was right. There's nothing backing gold. 10% of gold is value. Everything else is, centuries worth of people using gold as a storage of value. So, that's very different than what the rest of the conversations were about today.
David, should we call it gold instead of gold? I mean, I'm just wondering.
Let's get Drew. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, the gentleman that talked about him wanting to go back to the gold standard was referring to what we did at the Bretton Woods conference, where the 56 largest economies in the world got together and said, we're going to decide together that gold has this price this year, and we're going to base all sorts of indices in pricing against it, and we'll see how that works. And then, next year we'll look at it again and figure out if we need to change that value. And that did bring some relative stability for a period of time. There was no reason not to use platinum or silver or Tinker Toys or shoes, except that traditionally we've used gold as a specie currency and then later as a representative currency. The idea that there is something that is so intrinsically magical about gold is something that a lot of people feel very strongly about. I'm not here to anger all the gold worshiping folks among us. My point is that societies have decided that different things have had value at various times. Shells, cans of mackerel, beaver pelts, axes. There's all kinds of really interesting.
Don't say tulips, whatever you do. Don't do it.
No, I can't. I've studied this. I teach this. I haven't found a plant-based specie currency yet.
Oranges.
They're not terribly robust. But people who harken back to the good old days when you had a asset-backed currency may want to go back and figure out all the things that happened to get us off that standard. And now I know the strict constructionists in the Constitution will point to where we're supposed to have coins, and I get that, and I'm not arguing with founders on this one, just pointing out that deciding arbitrarily that gold is at price X lets you establish a price X for something, but maybe not much more else.
Yeah, but you can't.
Some folks in the world might call that market manipulation. Right? I mean,
yeah, but forget market, but you can't undervalue time. There's been a reason why it's sustained over a long period of time. And as much as we all love talking about this on a weekly basis, cryptocurrencies are still in their infancy. I love how many times the word immutable was used on Wednesday. We don't know that for sure. We need time to tell a lot of these things, and people have basically used gold for a long period of time, somewhat from a stable aspect, and that's good for everybody.
Yeah, hey guys, I want to play one more quick clip because it transitions us into the next topic. I know some people have to go in about 10 minutes. So Drew, I'm probably gonna have you comment first. And this was the part, this will transition us into part 2 of ICOs being potential securities. And I really liked this question from another one of the congressmen.
Privilege of sitting both on this committee and financial services. So I welcome this discussion by the panel when it comes to the next regulatory frontier as it impacts the two committees. First, Mr. Cooper, how should regulators think about the function of the token when choosing to apply regulatory requirements? Should regulators look to the functioning of the token at all or only the issuing activity? And for example, say there's a cryptocurrency, we'll call it for the sake of discussion, Bitcoin 2.0, and say it functions identically to Bitcoin in every way except that a small portion of the total tokens were pre-mined and distributed in a token sale. Is it possible to issue Bitcoin 2.0 through an ICO and not have it be a security? Or is the functioning of the token irrelevant because of the manner in which it's issued? So I'm asking what my folks back home would define as geek questions, but this is where we are.
Yes, sir.
I thought that was a very good question. And I open up that question to the panel. Who wants to go first? Maybe Bill.
I'd love to go first on that. This whole issue about whether, for example, an ICO is a security, and I think I talked about this last time, we have to go back to how a crypto asset can qualify as a security. And under the securities laws, there is an investment contract. So the investment contract is what you buy into in the ICO. you can have features of a token, for example, voting rights or staking, I think, that are analogous to what features that you might have for a stock or some type of an equity that would push a token closer to the line of a security. But really, what we're focusing on when we're talking about a security is the investment contract itself, not the token. And so there's definitely a situation where you can have the token, and this is, of course, my opinion, it's not fully fleshed out by the SEC or by the courts, but where a token is distinct from the offering from which it came.
I've got to go in 2 minutes, so I'll say one quick thing. It's easy and it's lazy of all of us to say something is or is not a security. What we have seen so far is kind of a division in how we think about these things. There are certain types of relationships created when a token is sold that is referred to, based on the Howey test, as a investment contract that requires the offering of the instrument to comply with the 33 Act, which means when you sell this thing, you have to make disclosures. That is something that is separate from whether the instrument itself, we've learned, continues to require to be treated as a security. We had statements maybe 3-4 weeks back from a senior level person within the SEC that talked about Ethereum becoming sufficiently decentralized, which suggests that there are circumstances in which something which would be required to be sold pursuant to the securities laws may change as a result of the network and the way it's used within the network to be treated differently than a security. This is new ground. We don't have 100% clarity as to where this is and where this kind of line of thinking from the regulator is going. But I know for sure that lawyers in this space are trying to figure out how to make sense of this. So to address what that congressman said, my final thought before I got to run, my final thought, if you're selling something and you're marketing it as it's going to offer a return, and it's a system that you in whole or in part control, and I know Jason wants to talk about who needs to be in control, horizontal or vertical commonality, it probably needs to be offered based on what the securities laws require. It doesn't mean it has to comply with all securities laws in the future. We just don't know exactly where the regulators are going. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
One last question for you, actually, that probably you can probably answer, but I really want to hear your thoughts on this, right? So remember, okay, so you're talking about securities, and so what happens when something is kind of like offered as security? It ends up kind of acting as a currency, right? Now, we know what the controls are for convertible virtual currencies, right? They are considered to be, if you offer something like that, you are considered to be an administrator, right? And you are an MSB. So what happens in that scenario? Like, let's say like ETH, for example, like nothing was really said about whether, okay, it's acting like a currency now. So does FinCEN have regulatory oversight over them? Like what happens? There's nothing about, where they sat under what regulatory body. What are your thoughts on that before you go? And thank you so much.
So if I understand the question, it was, does FinCEN under the BSA have the right to regulate ICOing companies? Or I think what you're really asking is, if you're offering something that is required to be offered pursuant to the securities laws, is it subject to the exemption from compliance with the BSA for issuers of securities?
Right. Yes, exactly.
A plain read of the BSA would suggest that issuers of securities do not have to comply with the BSA because they have to comply with the similar obligations imposed upon them by the securities laws. I haven't done a really deep dive on that, but I would suggest, and none of this is legal advice, obviously, but if you're selling tokens and you're not complying with the BSA and you're not complying with similar requirements of the Securities Exchange Commission applied to issuers, call a lawyer before you do anything else. Bye, everybody.
What's the black leather rule about buying a Lamborghini?
Call David Silver first.
All right, Jason, you want to jump in here? This is more your domain. You and I beat this horse hopefully, I thought we beat it to death with Ethereum a year and a half ago, but clearly it's like a mushroom.
Well, I'm going to...
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
Happy Friday.
Hey, Leah. Hey, Leah.
Oh, hey.
Hello, hello.
Joining
Hi.
us.
So I'm going to kind of say the same thing that I did before that caused you a lot of grief, Tone, in that it depends. Really, when you look at the life cycle of a cryptocurrency or a crypto project, it really starts off, every single crypto asset or crypto token starts off as a utility token right from the beginning, from the pure definition that whatever app it is, whatever function it is, it cannot exist, it cannot work, it does not work without that token's functionality. And that by definition is a utility token, that which is necessary in order for the network to function and operate. If you take that away, it doesn't work. So that's utility token. That definition, I was able to get into Panamanian law as they carved that out from what would be a securities token. Now, from any kind of crypto utility token, we start to advance based on use. More often than not, any kind of crypto company wants to take that pure utility token and they want to incentivize its use because they want it to go on an exchange, or they want people to buy it, or they want people to use it, or they want to pay people with it, at which point now we become a currency. And the moment we become a currency and we may be transmitting that currency, now we're jumping into BSA law that Adela has been the expert on for many years, and I'm not going to try to step in her sandbox. So we go from utility token now through use, through statements, through promises, through various manipulation. We go from utility token into a currency and money transmission. And then the final step that we cross more often than not from cryptocurrency companies is they move from currency into investment contract, because they try to incentivize people not only to use it as a currency, but they make promotional statements that say, if you use this, or if you acquire it, it'll be worth more later. So give me your money. We're going to do wonderful stuff with it. And at the end of the day, you're going to make a profit. So that's your basic Howey analysis. So within any crypto project, you really have those three levels.
Well, wait a minute. Why? It feels like the last one comes first in a lot of these things.
Well, yeah, when you look at it from the public standpoint, right? But Adela and I have sat in many a room together with many projects right from the beginning, from their inception, and we've tried to work with clients on, how do we break down what your product wants to do, what you want to do with it, and how do we keep it from crossing over those thresholds?
All right. So if the ICO creators have the right advisors from the beginning, they can avoid screwing up and putting the third problem first by saying something stupid on an interview.
Well, it all depends. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being an investment contract. If you're going to be an investment contract.
Right, if they follow the right regulation.
Well, or set yourself up to do it right from the beginning, or do an actual business analysis on whether or not you need to do that, or art is the only reason you're a cryptocurrency is because you're trying to take advantage of a hot market. So there's lots of different things to think about. But again, I'll just reiterate, every single crypto project generally starts off as a utility token first, and then it crosses into a currency, and then crosses into an investment contract. And that process of how fast it goes from utility token into an investment contract, it can take 30 seconds for somebody to say, yeah, let's throw it on an exchange, and we're going to tell people that it's going to pump and it's going to 10x. And that's all it takes to go from utility tokens straight into a securities environment. But, as Drew said, that all depends on, the statements of the promoter versus the statements of the investor or the purchaser, what's promised, at what point in time is it promised, before or after money is given. There's a very complex process of doing that evaluation. But, the bottom line is, as you said, Tone, right from the beginning, you're going to want to, if you are going to launch a network, or you're going to try to decide whether or not you're central enough or not central enough to defeat certain tests of the Howey test, it's not a bad thing.
Can I ask you a question? What about airdrops? If there's no actual sale at the beginning of it, but you've done everything else in terms of promising an increase, and it's based on the efforts of a third party, And there are cases by the SEC against stock companies that gave away free stock in the 90s and deemed those securities. So how would you classify airdrops in the Howey test?
So a lot of people think that an airdrop is just a de facto removal of the giving of money component, right? And so unfortunately, you get a lot of folks in the cryptocurrency space that are data engineers that think law is ones and zeros, that there's no gray area. We have 80 plus years of jurisprudence on the federal level. We have hundreds of years in the state level of blue sky law that have analyzed all these types of things. I'm not going to speak specifically to any type of function of an airdrop that's happened in the past or not. I think the only one at this point that I know of that I can, and I've specifically dove into and immersed myself in, that I can say is not a security would be Pepe Cash.
No, I was about to say that. Pepe Cash.
Yeah. Simply because, that drop was specifically intended to be a unit of account, not to be something that people expect some sort of profit or some sort of horizontal commonality to exist in order to profit share among that. But
that one, it might be a good example how the community contributed to the success of the overall company, taking it out of the third prong as well.
Sure. So anybody else want to jump in? I don't want to monopolize.
With respect to airdrops, I think that some of the considerations from the SEC cases, and I remember taking a look at this a few months back, was that the companies were essentially trying to create a market for these tokens and to create value by giving them to others and that they could be traded. And it's actually kind of a brilliant system to create value out of nothing. But then, of course, we do implicate the securities laws in certain contexts.
Yeah, I mean, the number one component of the Howey test and the first step is the giving of money, right? And everybody would agree on that. The giving of money under the management and control of others with the expectation of a profit.
Yeah, hey, Jason, I'm going to actually pull up Sasha's article to highlight that. I was going to get to it in a minute, but here they are. You did a great job of, doing it for the layman person.
Oh, thanks, John.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, what's interesting there is that, as is common with any court, it's referencing its latest court case that cited it. So here it has an investment of money in a common enterprise. The common enterprise component there is, a nuanced function called horizontal commonality. And half of the federal circuits are split on whether or not there needs to be horizontal or vertical commonality within any type of violation. But what's more important from an administrative or at least regulatory standpoint to understand is that the common enterprise component is not actually required. All that's required is that you've given money to somebody and they're the ones that have a little bit more control over it than you do. The courts and the SEC quoted a couple of pages on SEC v. Glenn Turner, which talk about how that continuum of control comes into play. If you haven't read Glenn Turner, I recommend it that you read that. If the SEC spent 2 pages on it in the Dow letter, you should probably read that as well. But here you'll notice that they don't even cite this as the Howey test or the citation for the Howey test. They talk about the 11th Circuit's interpretation of it, but this is just a common construct of how, the most recent case within that district is what that court is relying on.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Well, no, you were about to say something. Go for it.
No, go ahead.
So a bit different. I only have a little bit of time, so I wanted to be the obnoxious Washingtonian and have you guys jump in on this. But first of all, I think it's really important to remember that it's an election year this year, right? And we have a lot of hotly contested seats and Democrats needing to win them. And they're trying to pull all together for that one, right? Because obviously we have Republican House and Congress. So again, it's important time for them to win more seats. It's precarious in some districts, and which is why they focus on welfare programs, which is something that Adela was saying. So congressmen, congresswomen are going to say what their constituents want to hear for the most part. And especially, again, if they're in these hotly contested races. So I think we also need to look past what just they're specifically saying and that member and attributing it to that member, but also to the districts that they're in and how those districts are trending and what they need to focus on for them to win. So I actually, like, going back a tiny bit more, I didn't see the hearings yesterday as a negative. I think I'll talk about Sherman in a second really briefly. But for the most part, I didn't see it. I saw both sides. I think that there was a lot there. I think it was straddling. I didn't see it as a complete negative. But again, if we go to the Democrats, okay, and then Sherman is obviously a Democrat. Yeah, I mean, I believe they're going to be more likely in the end for pro-Bitcoin. You also see that in the fact that, you know, the FEC approved Bitcoin contributions in 2014, ruling that they can be in-kind donations. And you have a lot of trying to be Congress folk members, you know, that are taking Bitcoin as campaign contributions. But again, you know, they're going to be, I believe, more on the side of liberalism and younger generation promotion of innovation and tech, because that's who's voting for them. Okay, Sherman, yes, a very silly individual, but this is his MO. So, I mean, this is really nothing new. This is how he goes about things. He is rough at it. Okay, right, yeah, airdrops. Okay, so I will go, I guess, to it. But the only thing I just wanted to bring up as something that, you know, I did want you guys to talk about really quickly was just that, you know, lastly, and I'm getting feedback, is that Democrats respond to market turmoil with more regulations, right? Like Dodd-Frank tone. You know, we're talking about the Howard test, but let's also talk about the Volcker rule, right? Which was specifically argued as like that it would help, you know, stop such speculative activity that was, you know, played out and was, they're citing what happened in 2007, 2010. So with such a, you know, misunderstanding and no real regulations right now around what's going on, but everyone in all the agencies just trying to figure it out. And for the most part, Powell, and I think CFTC and the other agency heads that were talking, I think, again, we're not saying super, you know, going against regulations, but again, that it needs more study. And I do think it makes sense for them to come out and say that, you know, we need to be really careful. We've made huge mistakes in the past with speculative activities and by not making sure that they were in alignment and consumer protection and investor protection. So anyways, just wanted to say my piece on that before you guys did move on. Although sorry that I didn't say the word airdrop. Back to you guys. Jason, sorry.
One quick thing on the Volcker rule.
I was on mute. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Sasha. Yeah, and then we'll get back to the ICO versus security part.
Well, this might be way off topic, but with the Volcker rule, they prohibit proprietary trading. And so if we deem all of these ICOs as securities, I think it then puts them all in violation of the Volcker rule if their owners are selling or dumping the securities. Am I understanding that properly, or what are other people's opinions on it?
I didn't study up on the Volcker rule. I remember reading that it was only a 3-page document. I remember reading it like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, but I've already forgotten what that was. I also didn't brush up on the Dodd-Frank, which I thought they were voting out. So like, I thought they voted that one down. I thought most of the provisions of the Dodd-Frank have already been eliminated, but that goes specific towards, you know, the exchanges and how the exchanges are dealing with things, right? And Gary Gensler talked about that a lot. Like it's a completely different aspect of it, right? Like all of that stuff has to do with how these things are being traded on exchanges, and that's also, I guess that depends on. Are they being traded with leverage or not? Or are they being traded as a derivative? And then it's CFTC's, you know, oversight. And if they're not, then it's SEC's oversight. But those laws have to do with how these things are being traded. I think that before Congress and the regulators get to that part, they need to figure out what the hell these things are and where they should be traded and how they should be traded. And then afterwards, you can apply the current regulation of, you know, wash trading and all this other stuff. I think trying to regulate the way these things are being traded on exchanges before figuring out the difference between Bitcoin, a Bitcoin clone like Lightcoin or Monero, a Bitcoin clone with with an interest of, hey, I'm going to make money for myself, like a Zcash or a Dash. Like, yeah, it's a Bitcoin clone. It's a fair coin, but it was created for the sole purpose of the creator making a profit from the ICOs. And then there are some gray areas in between. I think I would rather really focus on, making sure that the regulators understand what assets they're actually dealing with before trying to figure out how to regulate them in a trading environment using the Volcker rule and the Dodd-Frank. At least that's just my opinion.
Well, you raised some really interesting points too, Tone, about it's actually something I've been thinking about. We're really contemplating, if we're talking about crypto exchanges, almost a hybridized type of exchange where you might have some things where the CFTC has said, for example, that Bitcoin can be a commodity. So you have CFTC regulations with respect to trading, right next to ICO tokens, which may be deemed securities. And so how are the exchanges going to be addressing these overlapping regulations with the order matching rules, with their engines and the software that trade these tokens is a really cutting edge and interesting topic for sure.
So I want to go speed down for a second. I'm going to come in front of Jason. So I'm going to start way back with Leah, saying I think Leah is totally wrong. Democrats aren't going to support Bitcoin. As a Washington insider for 10 years, I'm going to trump the Washingtonian and say that Democrats are all about regulation. If you look at all the leading 2020 candidates, they're all going to talk about consumer protections, which is just more regulations. I'm then going to go to Sasha. She's got to be the smartest one. I can't even spell Volcker rule, let alone know what this application is. And then I think what Tone was saying about the exchanges and what Bill was saying, and I think Bill and I kind of talked about this 2 weeks ago. This is going to be, for the next year or two, on-ramping and off-ramping, and how the exchanges start working with the government is going to be the next great expansion. And I think Gensler today, he was all about the regulations for the exchanges, AML, KYC. And don't forget, 1099Ks. This is all about taxes. And 1099Ks, if the exchanges have to register, and every single one of these trades, whether they be an ICO, a crypto purchase, buy, sale, if they can be 1099 and taxed, the government's going to be a lot more lax with allowing creativity if they get to control the taxation. So on-ramping and off-ramping of your money in the US and how the US is going to control that for tax purposes is probably if you had to ask me where the government's going to focus, they're going to focus on regulating that first. They want people, because they can't, I don't think anyone here thinks they can stop. I think when Sherman and others, and I think it was Peterson, who want to go back to the gold standard and say no crypto mining and no crypto anything, I don't think anyone on this panel is going to say that we're going backwards. In order to go forwards, on-ramping and off-ramping is the most important. I think they're going to regulate the exchanges first so they can allow for taxation and then allow for the development through sandboxes or something else. But the government's going to want to get their money. And they feel like in the last year with the expansion, they've lost out on their money.
Right. No, David, I completely agree with you. But I guess whatever part libertarian is still with me, though everybody will disagree, I am disappointed in that. I agree with you that is what's going to happen. I agree with you that that's the only thing the government cares about, is that, hey, the only way we can regulate these things and the only way we can pay the experts to find out what the hell these things are is if we tax the exchanges first. That makes total sense from them. I just wish that they would get a handle on identifying these things, separating ICOs being, a solicitation of money from actual crypto, from the only cryptocurrency we have, that's Bitcoin. And then from there, do their thing based on current regulation on exchanges.
Yeah. Well, there are no current regulations on crypto exchanges.
And the thing is, and doing it the way you're saying is the way they're probably going to do it. And that's going to lead to a massive bubble that's going to end disastrously and give you more business than you can handle.
I don't know if I agree with David's statement that there are no regulations that cover exchanges.
I completely disagree.
Good. Tell me how. Tell me what regulations apply.
I completely disagree. I mean,
Hey, Adela, is there any chance you can move your mic a little bit closer?
move my mic.
A little bit, if you have a mic.
Body to the.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So no, David. Exchanges are totally regulated. Okay.
Give me an example. Be specific. What's regulated?
Okay. So an exchange is considered an exchange, an exchanger. Okay. No.
An exchange is considered an exchange. Hold on. You and I agree. I'll agree with that.
David Silver, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
It's all about getting to yes. That's all it's about, getting to yes.
So FinCEN issued a guidance on the Bank Secrecy Act as it applied to companies wishing to transact in cryptocurrencies. And they identified 3 categories: administrator, exchanger, and user. An exchanger has to register as a money services business, okay? And then look to every state, each state, to find out if they need to, if they fall under the money transmitter law purview, I guess, there, and then register or get that licensing. Actually, it's not registration; it's licensing at the state level. But you definitely have to register at the state, at the federal level, and then you have to get that license at the state level. So yes, there are laws that apply to exchanges. And if
Hold on, I want to be clear with Adela. So far, we agree.
Question for you guys, if I can jump in to the lawyers. No, I know. I like this especially. How do you think that they can enforce United States security laws worldwide? Go to you, Adela. I mean, let's say, we make decisions, and then how can we enforce it in other countries?
What? Interstate commerce.
Well, I think it's going to be based on where the exchange is located, right? So that's number one. When you have exchanges that are based in the United States and they're trading things that could be deemed securities, I think it came up earlier in the podcast that, is something a security if it hasn't been deemed a security? Those are issues. I think that the exchanges would take the position that, if something came from an ICO, it probably needs to be traded in compliance with the securities laws. And what that requires really is a tremendous amount of disclosure by the exchange about how they are executing their orders, where the orders are going. And that makes a huge difference. I was dealing with a case several years back. It was against several cases against Schwab and TD Ameritrade that dealt with how they were routing their orders to various, how the broker dealers were routing their orders to the exchanges. And one of the things that we found was there's a tremendous amount of, we used to call them high frequency trading algorithms in the ecosystems. And I know we have that in the crypto exchanges as well, where essentially you can have bots that will jump back and forth between the bids and the offers and capture the spread every time. And what this allows is a tremendous amount of the value from the trades to be captured by really what I would consider to be parasitic actors in the ecosystem. So there's a tremendous amount of play for fraud to occur either in the software itself that executes the transactions or in the electronic algorithms that are allowed to trade in those environments. And once we deem something to be a security, all of those prophylactic rules that really benefit the investors come into play. And I think that's a tremendously good thing for crypto assets going forward.
So to answer Leah's question, which was there's an exchange outside of US jurisdiction, how do they get jurisdiction to that? There's two ways that any kind of U.S. regulator can have jurisdiction over a transaction or an investment contract or security. Either the issuer is from the United States or the purchaser is in the United States. You have either of those, and the United States, through what's called a long-arm statute, can gain jurisdiction over any participant in the contract, either the promoter or the investor. Generally speaking, how do you enforce that judgment? That becomes a question of the ability or the effort that the U.S. regulator wants to put into it in order to go after someone. When we look at Tezos, near and dear to David's heart,
look at Bill. Bill's the man on that one now.
Right. When you look at the Brightmans are sitting in New York, but the Tezos Foundation is supposed to be a Swiss foundation. It's very easy to get jurisdiction over the Brightmans here in the United States by basically piercing corporate veil from statements and activities, et cetera. So there are many talented and learned attorneys that work for state and federal regulators in the United States that are very familiar with the long-arm statute that have been doing it a whole hell of a lot longer than these 16 to 18-year-old crypto Lambo investors that create a token overnight and think it's going to go moon. So I think to that 16 to 18-year-old crypto Lambo guy, talk to David. He'll tell you how the best way to get sued in a heartbeat is, or talk to Adela and figure out how to comply, or talk to any one of us, and we'll walk you through it.
Thanks. And
Leah, I'll give the answer to the question in 5 words or less. If the person lives in the U.S., that gives them jurisdiction. So as long as there's something U.S. based, that's all that matters.
So a follow-up, and understood, yes, is do you think that there's going to be some sort of international task force on deeming these securities to band together with all our allies and figure something out, right? Like, what will we see, allies come together and we can make international laws?
We can't even get the UN to agree on anything. I don't know how we're going to.
They put a task force together, though, with Canada, the US, and Australia, and a few other places. We're looking into exchanges globally. I thought I read something on that.
That's an excuse to drink beer, really.
And build camels.
Hey guys, I wanna bring this conversation back to the case in Florida where a company that had an ICO, so a judge did declare that this ICO was a security. Now, it was very easy to do in this case because it was obvious fraud. They never actually did anything. They got a bunch of, stars like Floyd Mayweather and DJ Khaled to promote it. They promised that they were going to have all these businesses. Now, I'm not sure if they actually promised the unqualified investors that they were going to make money, but they did promise that they were going to do something that they didn't actually do. Did they also promise the people that were going to make money?
They promised an 8% dividend.
Okay. So this was a very obvious case. So even with an obvious case, and Sasha, as you broke it down as to how the judge applied each of the phases of the Howey test, it was an investment of money. In this case, it was an investment in Ethereum, which considered, an investment of value. It was in a common enterprise, which means that a company did, use that value that was given to them to build something, and there was an expectation of profit by others. And you broke that down. But again, in this case, no one is trading this ICO anymore. Everyone knows it was a fraud. But when is something like this gonna get used in a case where the ICO is popular, or is it only going to be applied in cases after it blows up?
Well, I think with this one, so the Centra defendants, they just conceded that it was a security. They didn't even argue it. They also have other actions against them, like this was the class action. There's the SEC against them, and then the Department of Justice against them. So I don't know if it's that they have no money to defend it or they just know they're going to lose on it, but they didn't bother actually defending this. They just conceded and left it open that they can argue this, holding at a later time. And then the issue in this aspect of it was whether they can get a temporary restraining order on the Ethereum. So there was 100,000 Ethereum, 90,000 in one wallet that's now seized, and then 8,900 some in another wallet that as a result of this action they gave up. But while doing that, the judge went through and looked at it from a securities law perspective. So I said to a friend when this came out on a couple months back in April, when one guy was arrested at the airport trying to flee the country, he should have got out way earlier than at that time if that was his plan. But the facts are so egregious here that it's going to be really easy to call them a security without going through all the analysis, and certainly that can be used against other ICOs in the future. But maybe it's not the end of the world that we classify them all as securities that meet the Howey test prongs. So.
Well, I suspect too that the defense counsel in this case didn't want that they stipulated to the issue of a security because they were hoping the judge wouldn't raise it, because they didn't want the analysis to be an opinion in an opinion just like this. The judge's analysis though was very, very thin. And I don't necessarily disagree with the conclusion, but it was, I as plaintiff's counsel in a similar case would not be relying on this opinion at this point, because right now it's still just a report and recommendation. The defendants have appealed it to the judge. What that means is the judge can look at this magistrate's opinion and say, I don't think this is right. I don't know why they would do that. But there's opinions tend to be to carry weight with other judges when they have a lot of analysis, and there's almost zero analysis in here. So I wouldn't think that this is going to be, a cornerstone opinion of any regulatory policy.
Now, what about the amount that he lost? He said he invested a certain amount of Ethereum into it, and then he sold out for a certain amount of Bitcoin. And from a US dollar perspective, the lead plaintiff, he actually made $500 in terms of US dollars, but he lost money in terms of his Ethereum buying power, because when he invested, maybe he invested 16, he got 13 back worth of Bitcoin. How do you think that's going to shape out in terms of any kind of legal actions that we're seeing? Do we take it? I think we should take it in the US dollar denomination, but otherwise it opens the door.
If you're talking about an action that deals with the original offering, right? You're gonna have to deal with. Well, let me take a step back. In the securities laws, there's different remedies that you can pursue. Generally, what investors have been trying to pursue is rescission of the contract, right? So that would mean we can pretend like it never existed, and I can take my Bitcoin or my Ethereum back, and I can give these tokens back. I don't have to deal with it. It's as if it never occurred. So you don't have to show losses. You can actually have a token that you could be up in fiat terms or even in Bitcoin or Ethereum terms, and you can still unwind the transaction. If you are not a person who, and that's only available if you are a person who bought directly in the ICO. If you are someone who bought from someone on an exchange, for example, and this was later traded, you would have to show loss, damages. And I think that you could show it either in Bitcoin terms or in fiat terms. We don't have any opinion on that yet, but I would suspect that we're going to find it could be either.
Well, in the Shavers case that I worked on, the SEC did not request the return of Bitcoin. They requested dollar amount value. And when they valued their claim against Trent and Shavers, they valued it for present day value at the time of the filing of the complaint, as opposed to the value of the harm on the day that the harm occurred. So there's multiple arguments in tort law on what's appropriate of whether or not valuation of a complaint should be based on present day value versus date of the harm. But the thing that we've seen from regulators is that they're tending to choose the US dollar component amount I think it's easier for a judge to understand and a jury to understand, the value of a US dollar versus the value of Bitcoin. Hey, I had 16 ETH and I only got 13 ETH back. You can't relate that to a common juror. But I think the smarter jurist or the smarter lawyer is going to put it in terms of a dollar amount.
And if we let that ETH go through, then I'm sure there's some trading pair that you lost money on out there somewhere. So then it could open up the door to argue any different.
Well, yeah, that's potential loss or speculative loss. That's hard to quantify. One thing that I'm about to go down an entire path that's not relevant. I'll just stop myself right there.
All right. So sticking with this, though, so what do you guys think? I mean, what's going to happen? Like, are they ever going to decide on something that is popular, or we're only going to be dealing with things after they blow up and there are complaints? Because this is this continues to remind me of the .com situation where all these companies were going public without anyone even considering that there's nothing there. It's just a website, and they're trading at $100 a share. Is the market going to sort itself out in a giant bubble?
Well, one of the things you may recall is
Jason, come on.
No, go ahead, David. Go ahead. I was going to bring up a relevant case where there was no.
I was like, you already said I'm going to give it breath for irrelevant. Okay, so I'm just going to say that I don't think we've seen a fight yet where someone has really stepped up to the plate and defended their position. Bill's seeing it in the Tezos case right now. We're going to see it in the XRP case, and the SEC is eventually going to take down a bad person that doesn't capitulate upon getting the enforcement action and the corresponding DOJ indictment. So, and we talk about this all the time. The SEC and the government, they have a long time to do it. It might be 2020 before this happens. But that's when we're going to see the first decree by enforcement through the SEC of what is and isn't a bad actor. I agree with Bill. I mean, the Florida Centra case, they're represented by real lawyers. Ballard Spahr is a solid law firm. Someone's paying that bill, and they're not letting that order go lightly, the report and recommendation. But again, they didn't really fight it. So I want to use XRP since Bill's on the call today. XRP has hired Skadden Arps, has hired the former SEC commissioner, and they're going to spend a lot of money defending their position. And I think that's going to be the first round of, case law that becomes really interesting for where we're going in the future.
And that's the thing. That entire situation bothers me because they're spending money that they created out of thin air with the Ripple token.
Yeah. I hate agreeing with you. Yes.
So if we want to look at a case in the crypto space where there was no harm, the only harm that was done was that there wasn't a registration of a security. We don't have to look any further than Eric Voorhees and Satoshi Dice and Feeds the Birds. In that case, it's uncontroverted that, Voorhees sold securities. He sold actual shares. It wasn't a token offering. It was, they were traditional shares. And everybody that bought got their money back plus some. So there was no harm other than there was no registration filing, and still the SEC went after him and fined him for that. 2015 at the Texas Bitcoin conference in Austin, Texas, I remember seeing Eric standing there in his sport coat, and there was a member of the SEC from the Austin office that was there. And I recall him, he was from Dallas, Fort Worth. And I recall him standing there at the question microphone and saying, "Hi, my name's Eric." It was very, meek. He said, why exactly are you, punishing me and everybody else when there was no harm done? And the response from the SEC was, we have a law on the books. You violated the law.
He didn't fill out the right paperwork. That's exactly what he pretty much said. I was there as well.
Yeah, that's right. And because you didn't fill out the paperwork, you committed that violation. And so we're going to fine you for that. And we're going to come after you for that. Had the SEC applied the same rubric to Ethereum, Tone, you and I talked about this, had they applied that same rubric to Ethereum when they did their initial launch prior to the network launch, but in their token offering, I think, and I criticized the SEC on this pretty harshly when I was in Los Angeles, I think you wouldn't see this Wild West market of wild abandoned ICOs launching every day. You would have some clear direction from the regulators on what they're going to do and when they're going to do it. But unfortunately, because they waited so long and because the cryptocurrency space is built of generally lemmings of, well, they did it and the SEC didn't act within 24 hours. So that means it's okay, right? That's the thinking of the crypto world, is that they got away with it for longer than 24 hours. So I'm going to do that too. And so because the SEC takes so long to do things, it just created this entire economy of ICOs that launched, and this is what we have. So if we're going to regulate, I'd like to see them regulate evenly across the board and not give special benefits to Ethereum and claim that they're somehow decentralized when they're not. I mean, I was on your show a couple of weeks ago, Tone, when we talked about the ridiculousness of the statement that Ethereum is so decentralized now that it's gone out of that management and control component, when I dare anybody to start a node today on Ethereum and be able to operate it. Anyway, that gets into a
that gets into a technological argument, and
but it's an important argument. Right?
It is. And on my morning show, I'm not sure if you watch it, but Giacomo Zucco from Italy, like, he hates the regulators as much as anyone. Like, he doesn't want the SEC to exist, but it bothers him so much that SEC's decision not to regulate Ethereum was based on technologically flawed understanding of how Ethereum works.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they got the analysis wrong. I think they got the legal function of it correct. They just didn't apply the law correctly to the facts, and that's a distinction. As a lawyer, we know that there is a legal rubric upon which you can look at something, and I think the rubric is correct. They just applied the facts improperly to the rubric. They didn't look into the technical aspect of it enough.
Right, and I agree. If Ethereum, if they applied that rule to Litecoin, I would be more okay with it, but not to Ethereum. Now, obviously, in Bitcoin, it's obvious. Well, it's obvious to us in Bitcoin.
Well, sure, because you want it to be.
It's close to being obvious.
All right. I challenged Fenton to a moot court session on whether or not Bitcoin was a security. I was going to allow him to bring in Marco to defend Bitcoin, and I was going to take the unpopular stance of why Bitcoin has crossed into the level of being a security now. But Fenton never took me up on it.
That would be very interesting. Hey, any final thoughts on this? I want to briefly mention Coinbase's new approval to trade these ICOs deemed securities. But I guess at the moment, the only one they can trade is this scam coin that's no longer trading, right? So, I mean, it's going to be interesting, right? Like the SEC, the Coinbase is ready to trade the ICOs deemed securities, but the only one that has so far been deemed is an outright scam. So,
I don't necessarily think, Tone, that just because so the approval that allows them to trade securities, and that was, from my understanding, the purchase of some entities that are already registered as broker-dealers.
Yeah, it's just easier to do it that way than filing all the paperwork.
Sure, it's easier to just acquire somebody who's got the licenses, but I don't think that means that they can't trade other ICO coins that haven't been deemed a security. I would think that if I'm at Coinbase, I'm going to say, okay, now we can trade ICO coins instead of just Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin and Bcash.
All those other new ones they added.
Well, no. I think it's the other way around, right? For example, if Ethereum is deemed a security right now, I don't think anybody can trade it, because the traditional exchanges that have the legal right to trade securities, they're not going to want it. And all of these other securities in the crypto space in the wild, wild west may not be legally allowed to trade securities. Otherwise, they'd be trading Apple stock.
I'll tell you what, if I had my dream and I could actually get a hold of the Cryptsy servers and get the Cryptsy name like I tried to challenge the trustee to be able to do 2 years ago, I would absolutely want to be able to trade Ethereum because of the volume and because of the market and because of the pure economics of it.
Right. No, but Jason, but if you're not, if you don't have the licensing to trade securities, just go and start your exchange and trade Apple stock and NASDAQ stock and whatever other stock you want. But they're going to come down on you, aren't they?
Sure. If I'm trading in registered security, sure.
Right. So if Ethereum is deemed a security and they're registered and they now become registered as a security, whether Vitalik gets in trouble for what he did or not is irrelevant, right? But if Ethereum is deemed a security going forward, if let's say they deem Ethereum to be a security tomorrow, within let's say 60 or 90 days, only exchanges that are registered to trade securities will be allowed to trade Ethereum. And right now, the only one that we have is probably Ethereum that actually, is actually Coinbase. That's the only one that wants to trade Ethereum, and it will legally be able to do it. No?
There's a few other alternative trading.
No. First, let's talk about the best part about that story, because we're just getting to the legal side. How about the fact that they announced the SEC blessed it, and like 2 hours later, I'd be like, oops, the SEC didn't really bless it. I mean, come on, that's the best part of that story.
I missed that part. Where was that?
So
in the same article.
Yeah. So Coinbase says it got the SEC approval, and like 2 hours later, I had to come back and say, actually, the SEC didn't approve it. We had some informal conversations with unknown people, and they are not willing to go on the record saying that we have approval. So I think I'm a big Brian Armstrong fan, despite suing the hell out of him. I mean, I like what he's doing. And this is yet another step in the right direction for properly accumulating the assets to be a 800-pound gorilla going forward. Whether or not he deserved to get there by doing some things wrong in 2012 through 16, probably. But that being said, these acquisitions are moving ahead with the presumption that in 2020 to 2025, all of these cryptos, ICOs, tokenizations are going to trade like registered securities. He's going to get his broker-dealer's license. He's going to get his registered exchange license. And he's going to trade all of these legally, presuming that's the way the world moves.
But the problem at that point, David, is that your 13-year-old crypto speculator who wrote a custom algorithm bot to be able to take advantage of the markets and manipulate the markets isn't going to be able to participate. And then your 10x, 100x PAMP is not going to happen. And your entire speculation and desire to be in the crypto markets is going to die. So David Silver, you just killed cryptocurrency. Well done. Good job.
One other securities registered as
don't go there yet.
ICOs that are doing, the ICOs that are doing like Regulation D, there's quite a few of them, like right now on Start Engine, T0 is doing it. Those will be able to trade on these, the new Coinbase.
Sure, on the alternative trading platforms, that's a good place for those to trade. But again,
but I want to go back to Jason prognosticating the future. I was on Jason's show when Bitcoin was going from 10,000 to 11,000 to
13,000. Yeah,
13,000. Where he said, "I'll have a drink," and he didn't actually follow through. So don't tell us. No one sit here believing that Jason could tell you the future. Because right now, as Bitcoin's, people say it's going back to, I saw someone today say they're holding true that by the end of the year, it's going to be 25,000 of Bitcoin. I mean, if that person knew that, they wouldn't be doing a podcast. They'd be going out, mortgaging their house and buying Bitcoins, because an ROI of 7, 14, 21, 200% in 6 months is pretty good.
So David, on that note of me being able to prognosticate the future, I will say, and Nathan, who you met in Panama, he and I had a bet of what would be more likely by the end of August, that Bitcoin would be at 5,000 or it would hit 7,200. And I took the 7,200 route and he took the 5,000 route, and we crossed the 7,200 threshold the other day. So my crystal ball is better than your crystal ball, David. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Jason, I want to go back to your crystal ball for a second. You said earlier.
Hold on. Let me.
Not that one. No, you said something earlier about the fact that these securities would only be able to. Obviously, we know that if an ICO token is deemed a security, it can only be traded on a registered exchange or an ATS, right? So we agree on
so
that.
we get AML, KYC, we get all
right.
that.
You said that unless they were registered securities or offered pursuant to an exemption from registration, even if they were a security, they wouldn't be allowed to trade. So are you saying that
I don't know if I said that.
Because it's my understanding that the registration or the exemption isn't applicable to whether or not an unregistered, non-exempt ICO can trade on a securities exchange. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, so we have thousands of ICOs out there that we think are probably unregistered securities. Are you saying that those unregistered securities can't be traded on these exchanges because they're unregistered?
So interesting question. Right now, you've got multiple exchanges in the United States, at least, and I've gotten multiple phone calls, and I still get phone calls, and I'm happy to help. Anybody can call me, where there are various cryptocurrencies who are looking to get some sort of a certification that they are not a security in order to be able to continue to be traded on certain platforms. And the reason being is that right now they're considered to be a currency and not a security, and that there's exemptions for trading currencies on certain platforms. So I've done analysis of whether or not these various cryptocurrencies have crossed that threshold into being a security or not, and if they have, what they need to do to correct themselves or modify themselves to be in compliance or to not be a security. So there are definitely places where there are right now securities being sold on unlicensed, unregistered securities exchanges. And those exchanges don't want to fall into that regulatory compliance of an SEC or even a commodities exchange. So they're trying to make sure that the participants within their markets are not falling into that regulatory zone. Where you get into an exchange, and I'm not an expert on how to run an exchange and what those laws are. I've been traditionally a securities fraud lawyer doing both plaintiff and defense work, not necessarily on the regulation side of how to run an exchange. But you're going to have to comply if you are an exchange with whatever regulatory scheme is coming down on you of what you can and cannot offer. And if you are an exchange offering a security, you're going to be in violation of that. Now, whether or not that Coinbase can simultaneously both sell registered securities and cryptocurrencies that are not securities, it seems to be that that's the exemption that Coinbase has been able to get, and that's the path that they're taking.
One interesting thing with that would be, I used to be a trader for TD Ameritrade, and anytime that a stock would go up 3x or 3 times, like they would halt trading on it. And I wonder, like the volume that we see on the crypto exchanges, that would certainly require a registered exchange to halt trading there. So I wonder how they'll handle that, or if the volumes will just stop because of the registration. And
well, it's a shame that David had to drop out, because that was kind of one of the cases he was working on, wasn't it? What was that coin where there was a bunch of flash trading and traffic and a bunch of harm, and he actually asked for that coin to voluntarily fork in order to unwind that? What was that coin he was working on?
I don't remember.
Well, it's an interesting case, right? To whether the exchange regulates that kind of manipulative market stuff and stopping flash traffic, right, Sasha?
But there's a bigger problem here that Coinbase is going to be dealing with, I think, very, very soon, is that in the traditional space, the broker is a separate entity than the exchange. And I'm getting some feedback from somebody. I'm not sure.
That's true. Brokers and exchanges are usually different.
They're different, right? So it's the broker is just pinging the exchange, but in the crypto space, the broker and the exchange is one and the same, and that creates a whole.
So broker is a loose term in a cryptocurrency world, right?
Well, no, it's one and the same. There is no there isn't one, right? Like, for example, you don't have an account with the New York Stock Exchange doing your trading. You have an account with a broker, an online broker like an E-Trade, that then goes
and they're going through clearinghouses,
go through a clearinghouse like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ or ICE or
or like, through their own stock, sure.
Right, or through their own, because they also have a reserve, so you can short the stock and stuff like that, right? So there's this whole separation of this power. And in the crypto space, there isn't. So I don't see, it's going to be a weird dynamic, I think. I don't see how Coinbase is going to offer people Apple stock to be trading unless they're pinging the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, I should say, in order to give people, the profits from holding Apple stock.
So I don't think that was the question, though. The question wasn't whether or not Coinbase is going to be selling Apple stock. It was whether or not they were going to be able to sell simultaneously ICOs that are registered as securities, Reg D, et cetera, that have gone general solicitation simultaneously with regular cryptocurrencies that are not securities. Wasn't that the question?
Right. I think they will be able to, in my opinion, not a professional opinion. Just like I think that if Coinbase now has the licensing to participate in trading securities, there's no reason why they can't offer their users the ability to trade Apple stock through their entities that now have that licensing.
I'm going to punt on this one. I'm not going to make it a statement either way. Whether they have the ability to or whether it's going to be allowed to are two different things.
Right. And they may not want to, right? They may want to focus on the crypto space. But I think by having that licensing to trade securities, they will be able to do both. And they might be the only ones.
And I had a client come to me with a really unique proposal to make a coin that would be 1-to-1 against, like, it was a company that was already listed on the pink sheets. So they already had the stock, and then they wanted to do a coin that people could basically go from their stock account into crypto. So it would be a new way to onboard money into crypto as opposed to going through Coinbase.
Sounds like money laundering to me.
It was, we didn't end up following through on it. It was just an intro.
Wise choice. Wise choice. Sasha, orange is not your new black. That's all I'm saying.
No, Sasha, it's a weird dynamic, right? Because I've been dealing with a lot of like traders that are coming into the crypto space. And to a lot of these people, their first experience in trading is the crypto space. And then some of them are complaining, well, why would I want to trade traditional stock? I can't exchange my Google stock for Apple stock. I got to first go into cash, and then I got to buy Google stock. And to them, this was like a foreign concept. Like, why can't there be a market of Apple versus Google and Google versus Tesla? They don't realizing what an infinite matrix it is of trading. Like now you have to keep, the history of every single transaction between every single stock that exists and every other stock that exists. Like the math goes exponential.
Oh my God. If only there was like this audited database that people used in order to keep track of those transactions, it would be.
No, you could keep track of it. Right. But like to our current people, this is almost like foreign. And you'd be surprised, like it is a lot of data. Like there is a reason why, and the Ethereum crazies will learn this. There is a reason why Bitcoin has a 1 megabyte block size, because as much as people think their 2 terabyte hard drive in their house is cheap, they don't realize that when your math goes, when this data gets out of control and your 2 terabyte at home gets filled up in a half an hour, you got a problem. Oh, you're muted, Jason.
Yeah, no, that's right. But it seems we've lost everybody else.
It looks like it. And I didn't even get to like the topic I really wanted to get to. And I don't want to get you guys in a bunch of trouble. So maybe you can stick around for a minute. I do want to talk about my current situation with TokenPay. And if you guys are willing to listen for a minute and then give your opinion, that'd be great.
No, I'm not giving you any legal advice on the death threats against you, Tone. I'm just not. I'm going to punt on that one. Okay, Sasha, it's all yours.
Okay, wait. Before you punt, before you punt though, before I even say what happened, right? So right before this video, I decided to watch their video that they made right after I, accused them of being a scam and stuff. But in this video, right, the CEO actually talked about how the main reason for having the TPAY token, which again, with my expertise in the crypto space, being 5 years now and looking at a million, like hundreds of white papers and deeming all of this thing to be nonsense, like the Ripple token being useless and everything. So he blatantly says that the only reason for having the TPAY, the main reason for having the TPAY token is to create an incentive for their platform. And as I'm listening to this, I look in the upper right of my YouTube channel, and I see a video, obviously not by the TokenPay YouTube channel, but I see my next suggested video is TokenPay is the next 100x coin, right? So like at which point is there a liability on the CEO publicly speaking how this token was created as an incentive, which to me sounds like he's blatantly saying that he's expecting this token to go up in value.
Tone, what's your question here?
What do you think?
Well, it sounds to me like you got personally involved in trying to take down a scam. You got emotionally invested in it. Something bad happened to you. And to use the parlance of the cryptocurrency space, you're a little butthurt.
No, but okay, so I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you if it's a scam. I know if it's a scam. I know it's a scam. It's obvious to me. It only took me a minute, right? Like I didn't even have to find things like this, like long winded pieces by insiders of the ICO launch, accusing the CEO during the CEO launch of scamming people out of promises of how many tokens they're going to get. Like
is the CEO Justin Valo or Valo?
No, it's what the hell's his name? Hold on.
You realize you have more tabs open than anybody ever come across.
You should see the browser on my other monitor. It has like 8 times as many.
That's insane.
But it's Derek Capel. Derek Capel is the CEO. I will say that the day after I did my
scroll down a little bit. Scroll down a little. See, one of the things that I like to look at are the pictures of the team that's involved, right?
Right.
So no, wait. Go back to the head of design. Scroll up. What is this on this guy's shoulder? What is that? Is that a cat? Victor, yeah. What is that?
It's either a cat or like a muskrat or something. I don't know. It's some kind of animal.
This guy picked this picture as being representative of his professional profile, whereas Bogdan Zavera looks like that's a mugshot.
Well, here's a better one, right? When I started doing my research,
and you're taking away from my fun here.
I know. No, this is going to be more fun. When I started doing my research, the second picture next to the CEO was the chief operating officer, who is also the chief marketing officer for another token called Verge, who claims to be in the crypto space since 2009, and his name is CryptoRect. I went to his Twitter. Everything all over his Twitter is him promoting Verge coin, the one that got 51% attacked 3 times. And right after I sent out this tweet, within 24 hours, he was removed from their team on their page. He was right here.
So wasn't Verge like the #1 crypto coin used for Pornhub?
Yeah, so Pornhub decided to use Verge instead of Bitcoin, and the coin got 51% attacked within a week.
And then
Verge's CEO, his history, he has arrests for possession of narcotics, providing false names, trespassing, criminal mischief, prowling.
Listen, sounds like youthful fun to me. I mean, those are fancy names for being a teenager.
Yeah, but if we were in the securities market, the SEC would not approve this person to do
but it sounds like he's a teenager.
I didn't research Verge coin and its like team. But TokenPay is very proud of being partners with Verge. And I saw tweets from the TokenPay account saying that they own either 65,000 Verge or 65 million Verge or something like that. So that's what gives them all of this money. And they also had their own ICO, which again, they sold their token. They were selling their token for $5.46 on the ICO. It looks like they paid.
Are you going to do a point here anytime soon?
My point? Are they a security?
Who cares? Look, you don't need an ICO to be a security for it to be fraud. Okay, that's not a requirement.
No, it's not. It's not. But it makes it easier for you to make the argument that they are fraud and that they are a security.
Look. I'll go back to what I said earlier today. You have these tokens that start off as a utility token. Every single one starts off as a utility token. Bitcoin is a utility
before
token.
They sell it. Like if
Right, but what is its utility? Like, look, I can debate in court as a witness. This thing has actual utility.
It doesn't matter. Every cryptocurrency starts off as a utility token, just like Bitcoin is. Pure definition.
Right, because you're being rewarded in that token.
No, it's not a reward. It's that which is necessary for the operation of the network. Okay?
Their network, sure.
Done. We agree on that. Okay?
Right.
But I don't agree with you on the order, because a lot of times aren't they selling their ICO before they've actually built that utility token that's used in the network?
Given, but the idea that they're starting with the utility token concept, right? That they're going to have this thing and it's going to run on the network.
Right. They basically try to convince the world that this token is necessary to run their software.
Yeah, correct. And so you start off with a utility token, whether in pure electronic existence form or within idea and concept. And then you move into the incentivization mode, where too many people have looked at tokenomics and they believe that in order to make their token more attractive to the cryptocurrency space, they have to do all kinds of stuffs with it, right? So it's at that point in time that almost every single one goes from being a utility token into some form of an offering or some form of promise or some form of statement or general desire that on the day that the network is launched, it's going to 10x in order to get some sort of legitimacy or get some interest for people to buy them and run them on the exchange. And that's generally where people say.
Okay, I actually have a question. Here's a question. I got a question. So
ask Sasha. I'm talking too much.
No. I have a question. You can say no comment though. I have a question.
No comment.
So, I only have screenshots of about 2 tweets. There was probably there was way more. I know I saw at least one of them threatening legal action against me for, I'm not even actually sure for what. It's either defamation or accusing them of being a fraud. Sasha, I think you're getting a lot of feedback.
Oh, I'll put it on mute. Sorry.
Unless it's coming from me. Nope, still not muted. I'm curious where it's coming from, you or me. Yeah, it was coming from you because it went away. So here's the question, right? If they do accuse me of either, defamation or fraud, it doesn't matter, right? I will have to go to court and prove that I was right and that they are a fraud and that they are a scam.
Just turn around. Look, there's all kinds of protections for First Amendment. And
no, but I actually want to go to court. No, I want to go. I would want
really?
to. Really?
Okay, I'll represent you. I'm going to need a huge retainer.
I know.
I'm not doing it.
I'm aware of this, right? But here's the question that's coming, right? I would, if I can afford it, if I can afford you or somebody else on the show, in order for me to actually prove that they are fraud, would I be able to subpoena them for their holdings of these tokens, right? Like I would, like, Charlie Lee's involved in this. He's part of the deal. He's one. So is there any way I would be able to subpoena Charlie Lee and find out which tokens he holds? Because I will accuse them of paying off Charlie Lee, but the only way I can prove it is if I have a subpoena for Charlie Lee to turn over the private key, not the public keys. It'd be nice to turn over the private keys, or for Charlie Lee to turn over the public keys of his holdings of TokenPay and potentially Litecoin, and then at least I can find out if he sold the Litecoin or not. Like, would I be able to subpoena their internal players for their crypto financial personal holdings in this case?
Go ahead, Sasha. You want to take this one?
Because I don't know. I'm dying to know. If the answer is yes, I will absolutely be begging them to.
I believe yes. I'm just looking it up right now, what the actual standard is. It's Rule 45 of the Federal Rule of Civil Procedure. But I think if that's a paramount issue to proving your that you were right, that there is truth, and the burden to prove that it's truth is not actually on you. It's on, because if you're considered what's a public figure, the burden is actually on them to prove that what you're saying is false. But if it were your burden to prove that it was the truth that you said, then you would require that information, that your statement that they're a fraud is correct. And the judge agreed that you need Charlie Lee's information to prove that they're fraud, then yes, you would be able to subpoena it.
Wow. So I would be able to subpoena anyone in the Lightcoin Foundation, anyone in Verge.
The judge would have to say that.
In TokenPay, all of the people whose pictures are on their teams, I'll be able to subpoena them for their public keys across all of their crypto.
So sure, you can try. Whether you actually get answers or not, right? So I was running an internship this summer, and one of the things that we talked about, which was a pretty key function of understanding how law works anywhere around the world. Anywhere around the world. I don't care what jurisdiction you're in, right? You have constitutions, you have statutes, you have regulations, you have state, local law, municipal law, you have customs, and then what nobody ever thinks about is the reality of the situation. And the reality kind of trumps everything. You can claim that you can subpoena, these keys all day long, but how do you extract that from somebody's mind?
Well,
right?
No.
That's the reality of the scenario. You can subpoena all you want, but the reality is you're never going to get what you want, right? So if that's the case, you want to go after that.
Jason,
you have the resources to do it. I will definitely be your attorney. I will take your money. Sasha wants in. I can look. She's nodding her head. Full-time employment. High five, Sasha. Put the hand up. Bang. There it is.
Jason, look. I agree with you. Of course, it can lie because I understand how crypto works. I understand how Bitcoin works. I understand that they could lie and not provide their public keys. But the thing is, when you get that, you've worked with cases, you defended Trayvon Shavers, right? When you get that, government stamped letter in the mail saying that under penalty of perjury,
and people still lie. Tom.
And they still lie. And what happens to them if discovered that they did? It's not good.
Nothing.
Oh, come on.
Generally nothing. They don't care. They go after the bigger issue. Right? I mean, the larger issues are at play. Tone, you still haven't answered my question. Why are we even talking about this?
Well, one reason is I would like to, there are other people like me that accuse these things of scams like they should be. And I'd like them to know how far they can go before they get scared from some company on Twitter threatening to sue them.
Tone, I want you to raise your left hand. Go ahead. Yeah. Raise your left hand.
Yes.
Come on, put it up there. Repeat after me. My name is Tone Vase.
Yes, my name is Tone Vase.
And I am butthurt. Come on, say it.
Okay, no, I'm not butthurt. It's just that, look, my job is to explain why the TokenPay token is completely useless and it's garbage. And the only reason it was created is to enrich one guy.
Great.
And that's what I do.
Your job is done. You've done your job. Move on to the next one.
So just on that note too, there's a clause that's called the neutral reporter privilege, and it gives people that are trying to provide coverage of, they can actually make unverified accusations of public figures without, so they get like they're allowed to go even further than a regular person in terms of what they're saying about them. So even if what you said is not verified, they still can't win a defamation suit against you because you've got the reporter privilege.
See, this is the difference between Sasha citing the law, which is perfect, and me citing the reality. And that's just two lawyers coming about it from different ways. I go after the reality. Sasha, she's quoting the law. She did exactly correct. But Tone, if you want to go after him, you've got law, you've got reality, you've got both of us together, full-time employment, Sasha, bang.
Well, no, I got no.
We got your back.
I got no time to sue anyone, but
and I'm pretty sure Sasha takes Bitcoin. I know I take Bitcoin.
How do? Okay, fine. I got two more questions. One of them is, if
you understand, you're getting legal advice on the air about your actions, right? But as you very well know from the name of my show, I'm not your lawyer.
Yes, correct. Right. Would there be potential countersuits a person in this position could file?
The truth is like an absolute bar to any of this. It's a case, New York Times versus Sullivan from the 60s. And basically anything that you say, as long as it's true, they can't sue you for any defamation. They wouldn't have any countersuit. If
right,
you were
in order for me to prove that it's true, I would need their public keys, which is great, which is going to be my first subpoena.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
cool.
I think there's also something about reputation. Like if what they said was damaging to your reputation and it actually had a financial impact on your employment, then you could countersue them for damage of reputation, or they could sue you if.
Oh yeah, no, I'm broke. I have no money.
So there's this little thing. I'll let you look it up, Tone, on whether or not it applies to you. You know your facts better than I do. But there's this fun little strategic lawsuit that comes in handy in times like this that I learned from a friend of mine named Carl back in Oregon. It's called a SLAP suit, SLAPP. Look it up. For those watching, look it up. It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
it might be relevant.
All right, yeah, I'm going
to leave it at that.
Okay.
So I'm not your lawyer.
Yes. Last one. The CEO of TokenPay has actually been trying to reach out to me. I don't know why, because the company is threatening to sue me. And I think they want to do a podcast. They might not want to after this little 10-minute discussion, but should I entertain the idea of putting the CEO on my YouTube channel on a podcast?
I think you need to hire Sasha to be your legal representative as part of that, to monitor that. So she can be your lawyer, and I will volunteer to be mediator of the entire podcast and do it without pay, so that there's no question of whether or not I have any kind of incentive to be a part of that. What do you think, Sasha? Again, full-time employment, bang.
Yeah, you're doing good on that, Jason.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to, Sasha. We'll talk offline about your retainer for the 2 hours or the 1 hour of podcast if he agrees to do it.
All right. I think from a views perspective, people would probably be really interested in a show like that.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for sticking around through this end mess. Next week, hopefully there'll be more exciting stories in law. I will not have my personal issues involved in the law. Hopefully, though, every week, who the hell knows, based on my current lifestyle. But hey, thank you guys for coming on. I want to thank everyone that was on earlier. David, Bill, Drew, Adela, Leah stopped by.
Don't forget Ross's legs.
Ross's legs. It's hard to remember everyone, but
Rossa needs some sun tanning time.
Yeah, like the number of lawyers that could be joining the show is growing. I think this is a great show. Hope to see you guys again next week. And everybody else, thank you so much for watching, guys.
Thanks, Tone. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Tone. And can I shout out to Block Spaces for giving me this little podcast studio today?
Yeah, definitely shout out to Blockspace over in Tampa. I gotta go visit your office over there, guys. Good job.
Thanks.